It's Friday, December 5th, 2025. Welcome to Make It Make Sense. I'm Grant Herms. Today on the show, I had Amanda Litman back on. She's the head of Run for Something, the organization that helps Democratic, Millennials, and Gen Z candidates run for office and gets more people involved in government in general. And I wanted to have her back on because the news has gotten pretty busy. We had a holiday interrupt this, but we didn't spend a lot of time on Make It Make Sense talking about the generational shifts that we're starting to see, especially after that sort of mini midterm we had last month in November. We also had Zohran Mamdani, the new mayor of New York, meet Donald Trump, and this sort of meeting of the generational leaders right now, and what that signals about where our politics might be heading. And Amanda is the best person I know right now to talk about exactly where things are heading and how younger candidates are starting to push and influence their own power. Put that on our American politics right now. It's a really interesting conversation all about what's ahead, specifically for the Democratic Party, but it can also apply to the Republicans as well. What's ahead for long-time, much older candidates in Congress, and what it might look like for younger members of our American political ideas to be a part of the presidential race in 2028. And maybe not even that big. We also talk a little bit about how the ideas that are pretty unpopular at the federal level right now might encourage more people to run for office, but at the local level, and what that means for you and me. Before I get to that, make sure you're following or subscribe to the show, whatever podcast app you listen to it on. Like and subscribe on YouTube if you're a watcher. Sign up for the Make It Make Sense Substack, where right now it is the Make It Make Sense Substack Drive, where you can get your paid subscription to Make It Make Sense to help support independent journalism, to keep this my full-time job, to make It Make Sense keep going. Is just $5 a month for monthly subscriptions. Annual subscriptions are 20% off right now, and if you become a founding member, that price is locked in for good, no matter how much subscription prices have to get raised in the future. That is only for the next couple of weeks, so this is your time, if you've been thinking about becoming a subscriber, to do it. You get access to weekly original reporting, you get access to the brand new newsletter, things you forgot from Civics class, and to the Make It Make Sense community chat on Substack as well. Again, that is just $5 a month or $50 for the entire year. That is a 20% discount. You can find all the links to that in the bio. And of course, share the show on social media. It's MIMS Newspod. It's MIMS Newspod. All one word on every platform. I am at Grant Herms on Twitter and Blue Sky, and at Grant_Herms now on everything else. All right, let's get to my conversation with Amanda Litman. Give the gift of luxury this holiday season with Cozy Earth. Picture it, a quiet holiday morning, everyone together wrapped in warmth, laughter, and that perfect kind of cozy that you just wish you could bottle all the time. Well, a silent night starts with the right sheets, and Cozy Earth's bamboo sheets are the ultimate gift. It's everyday luxury elevated, the kind of comfort that turns every night into a serene escape no matter how much clatter arises. Plus, every sheet has a 100-day sleep trial and a 10-year warranty. You really cannot go wrong. And don't forget about the pajamas for those holiday mornings. The women's stretch knit and the men's bamboo sets are made for those slow, snuggly holiday moments at home. Visit CozyEarth.com and use my exclusive 40% off code MIMS25, that's MIMS25, to get 40% off your entire order this holiday season. And if you get a post-purchase survey, make sure you heard about Cozy Earth from Make It Make Sense. We get a cut of that money, so you're helping us, and you get to stay warm this holiday season. Wrap the ones you love in luxury with Cozy Earth. All right, let's get back to the show. Amanda, thank you so much for coming back. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Grant.
So the last time we talked, your book had just dropped, which is excellent, by the way. It was one of my favorite reads of the year so far, so it's fantastic. So listeners, if you haven't run out to go get that yet, the link will be in the show notes. But we also talked before the elections earlier this month, and up and down the ballot, it wasn't just a Democratic sweep, but it was a generational one too. So can you give me the state of, I guess, play here for Millennial and Gen Z elections right now?
Mm-hmm. So let's ground this a little bit, at least Run for Something's results here. So Run for Something had 222 Millennials and Gen Z on the ballot in early November. We had 144 outright wins, 9 candidates moved to runoffs. 43 of those were red to blue flips. We won across a couple dozen states, 70% municipal races. Amazing. Amazing. So, whole new class of leaders at the state and local level. Putting aside, yes, of course, we've got like our Gen X ladies and Mikey Sherrill and Abigail Spanberger, our millennial mayor in New York City. It is just the beginning of a big tipping point in generational power.
I've heard you say that before, that this was a tipping point. Why do you think that this is sort of, I don't know, tipping point, watershed, pick your metaphor, but like, why do you think it's this moment?
I think there's a frustration with the class of leaders, broadly speaking, that got us into this mess. Whether they like proactively did it or just like didn't do enough to stop it, we have reached a moment where, and I think every sort of focus group polling shows us this, the leaders who got us to this point do not have the trust nor the skills or stomach to get us out of it. Like people don't count on them. They are beholden to the old way of doing things. They still think of the Republican Party as like the party of John McCain or Mitt Romney or George W. Bush and not Donald Trump. And they don't understand how to communicate in this moment in a way that breaks through. There's only some exceptions. I'm generalizing very broadly, but there's a reason that the Democratic Party has like a 67% disapproval rating at best, or 30% approval rating. Like people don't like them.
Right. And that
They don't like
Schumer
them.
is the least liked Democratic leader, I think, in like 30 years, if not ever, in the Democratic Party right now. There's a reason for that. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so when you look around, it is not hard to say, like, we've got to try someone different. We've got to try something different. And I think in particular, Millennials and Gen Z have an ability to speak to the crises of the moment in a way that older leaders might struggle to do so. I've been actually thinking about this a lot lately, of the challenge that comes with trying to understand like exactly how expensive childcare is right now, or exactly how hard it is to ever imagine buying a home if you're not living it. That's not to say you can't govern it and solve for it and write policies for it, but I don't know about you, but I always make a point when I'm talking to my grandma of being like, well, Grammy, here's exactly how much I pay in childcare every month, because that's why I'm not buying a home.
Yeah.
Putting aside, like, there's no homes to buy in New York City, but like, that's why. Because a down payment is going out of my home every month and thousands of dollars to childcare.
Right.
And I can't work if I don't have childcare. So like they don't get it. And when you have younger leaders who are living it, or their peers are living it, or they're experiencing the like lack of agency that comes when affordability hits close to home, when it's not just that I can't buy a home, but I can't ever imagine buying a home. And I can't imagine dreaming of home ownership. That lack of agency and that lack of ambition is something that younger candidates can really speak to in a way that for older leaders it's just a little bit more intellectualized and less like visceral.
Sure. I also think there's an wealth inequality gap there too. A lot of these older members of, state level as well as national level and even local level, depending on where you live, they've been there for a long time. They've made a lot of money because they've been able to be there for a long time, for good or ill, depending on how that money was made. And I think that they're just sort of divorced from a lot of those daily realities. I think this idea of affordability is really interesting because, yes, you had, the Gen X governor wins in Virginia and New Jersey, and you had Zohran Mamdani win in New York, and all these candidates down ballot. A lot of those were about affordability. And I think a lot of Politico people talk about that as a moderation of Democratic talking points for a lot of these candidates, but like your face just now.
Yeah.
Like that's the face of disgust. So like, I don't think it's moderation. I think it's something else. But what do you think it is?
Well, I think we're not used to paying attention to state and local races is one part of this, where when you're running for governor or running for mayor, you have to talk about the specific things you're going to do for people because you're actually going to govern. Like, I do think this is one of the challenges that candidates, I was just on the phone earlier today with someone running for Congress, a Run for Something alum, and I was talking with her about, how her campaign is going and like, what is she hearing from folks on the ground? And she was saying, people don't want to hear me talk about holding Trump accountable. They don't believe that I'm going to do it, but they also just like, that's not what directly affects their personal life. They're talking about housing and healthcare. They're talking about childcare. They're talking about transportation. And it's really hard if you're running for Congress to credibly promise to do anything on those issues, at least while Trump is still president.
Right.
Because the steps to get there are, we win majority, we govern as majority, we get president to sign bill, and then we execute. Like, that feels so distant. Whereas a mayor or a governor, they're an executive. They can actually do stuff within the constraints of their state or city government. So I do think part of this is just we're not used to paying attention to state and local races in the same way, especially ones that are happening in this particular moment.
Do you think in this moment in which the federal legislature is giving up so much power and authority to the executive at the federal level that as a, I don't know, silver lining, it might be that people turn to the state and local a little more because it feels like nothing is going to change what's happening at the federal level? Is that what's happening here?
I think so. I hope so, if I'm being honest, because I think it's the only way we're going to get out of this mess. Like rebuilding is going to have to happen from the ground up. We're not going to get meaningful climate legislation out of this Congress or this White House. So if we're going to like mitigate the climate change that's coming, it needs to happen on the state and local level. We're not going to get meaningful reproductive rights legislation out of this Congress or this White House. It has to come on the state and local level. So I think that's why Run for Something has seen 75,000 people raise their hands to run for office this year since Trump won this time last year. That's more than we had in the entirety of Trump's first term. Because I think people are pissed and they're like, man, if I want to actually do something, I need to run for office. I need to run locally. I need to run in my community. I need to step up and make a difference because otherwise no one else is going to do it for me.
Right. These aren't people running for Congress or Senate. They're running for maybe state Senate or state representative.
State House, state Senate, but usually like city council, school board, library board, municipal boards, county legislatures, the real building blocks of democracy.
And the stuff that touches our lives every single day.
Mm-hmm.
The stuff that touches like kids' lives at the schools they go to or our neighbors' lives in the parks that they go play in, that kind of a thing. And I think that's really important right now. The other thing, which is sort of the other end of this, is Zohran Mamdani visits the White House. And the strangeness of that meeting in itself is one thing, which if you want to talk about that and your reaction to that, that's great. I saw this as more of this sort of generational clash or coming together. Makes it feel a lot more friendly than I think it actually was. But it certainly wasn't a changing of the guard, but it was on display, this side by side of how two politicians from opposing generations operate. I think it's really interesting. But how did you see this?
Two guys from Queens just yapping away. No, I think one, it's a testament to Mamdani's charisma and really rigorous political skill. Like that is a man who prepped for that meeting. And he's talked about in interviews since he knew exactly what he was going in to talk about. He talked about ULURP and like land use policies. He also talked about childcare and rent and groceries. He talked about how he started his campaign going out to Fort Hill Road out in the Bronx and talking to Trump voters to ask them why they voted for him. And Trump is a crazy person, but he's not a total dum-dum. He likes winners. He's a star fucker. He likes handsome men with good hair. And I think he could see that this is someone whose charisma he wants to glom onto. He wants a little bit of those like good vibes. Trump is also not like an ideologue. He's not. He's a crazy person, but he's not an ideologue. He's attracted by shiny objects, and Mamdani came in as a shiny object. I think Trump likes people who are good on TV, and Mamdani is very good on TV. So actually, I do think it was an interesting side-by-side example of like Trump is the boomer version of like grandpa yelling at the television, and Mamdani is the millennial version of like being really good at TikTok.
Yeah. And sort of in that way, Trump is sort of drawn to him in this.
Yeah, I think so.
Does that make Mamdani, who I think is a unique politician in a unique race and in a unique place and experience, but that sort of model of him having these kinds of skills, which can be learned, and some of them can't always. Charisma is hard to teach. You got it or you don't.
Yeah.
But is that maybe a way for millennials and Gen Z and even Gen X candidates to sort of learn how to, I don't know, shine the older generation of politicians a little bit because they understand the world in this way? I don't think Trump is unique in that to other politicians of his era. So is that the path forward to try to find some way that millennials and Gen Z politicians can reach leadership roles?
I think it's part of it. I think, I say this only kind of jokingly, they were modeling some real intergenerational friendship there. If not friendship, respect, at least one way. I'm not sure Mamdani respects Trump, but I mean, he respects the office, if not the person. But I think that there is a real power that comes in listening. And this is something Mamdani's incredibly good at. He was good at it as a campaign tactic, but also if you've ever been in a room with him or gone to an event, you can see and you said charisma isn't something you can teach. I do think there's a certain amount of it where part of charisma is being able to lock in on someone and actually hear the words that they are saying. Not be thinking about the words you're going to say while they're talking, but like really make it clear. I'm like getting very close to the camera. Like, lock the fuck in. Know that that you have my full attention. And it gives a sense of warmth and vibes and connection that make you feel like you're the only person in the room. Mamdani was incredibly good at that. And I would imagine to Trump, who loves to be the only person heard, that's a powerful sort of connection.
Yeah. I'm curious about what you think then is sort of the next moment here for this. As we look forward from these wins, as we look forward as maybe Mamdani as a model of a style of politicking, of campaigning. I don't know if his policies will work everywhere, but I think that approach to this is really interesting. So what do you make of right now this moment we're in which you've got huge names, I mean, titans of the boomer generation, like Nancy Pelosi retiring, people like George, I don't think he's long for the leadership position if he's long for his seat in the Senate either. So what do you make of the current landscape right now of what looks to be like the edge of a real generational shift?
It's about damn time, you know? So the Lizzo song is just playing on repeat in my head. I think it is, I say that jokingly, but it really is. These are folks who have been in power for decades, longer than you or I have been alive. And they, if not fully responsible for the mess we're in, have been part of it. And I think for many of them, retiring is acknowledging that while they were the right people at the time that they stepped up to lead, they're not the right people to move us forward. And I think it's really exciting that you've seen in all these races where the incumbent has retired or made it an open race, really exciting primaries. Like New York 12, where Jerry Nadler stepped away, is just like an abundance of riches. Jan Schakowsky's seat in Illinois, there's like 17 Democratic candidates. California and Nancy Pelosi's race, really interesting primary there. In each of these, over and over again, you are seeing multiple unique, diverse leaders of different levels of experience and interests and passions step up to run, many of whom, not all, but many of whom would be really good members of Congress, maybe different, but good. It like really hammers home the point here, which is that for any of these older leaders to say, well, only I could serve, was so grounded in ego and not reality. That actually we've built really deep benches of talent in these places, that there is incredible young folks who could step up to run if we create the space for them. And it's why I often give credit to the first person who jumps in before the incumbent like retires, if only because I like the people who get in when it's hard and when it's not a sure thing, even if they're not always the best person. But I like the people who do it when it's hard.
Do you think right now that as new leaders come in, as those people who jump in first because it's hard or because you got exciting races in places, and I would also add the Michigan Senate race because I'm in it
totally.
right now.
Another great example.
Yeah, it is really fascinating right now for Stabenow's old seat. Do you think that more and more the older generation will see that, oh, there is someone who can follow this? Because I think that for a lot of them, when they think that I'm the only one who can do this, part of that, when you talk to them about it, they're like, I just don't see anybody who can fill this need. And I think some of that is ego and hubris. I think a lot of it is, to be honest. But do you think that we'll start to see more and more people move out of the way? I know that it's pejorative, but yeah.
I do. And I don't think it's pejorative at all. I think it's the reality of the facts on the ground. And I think we've talked about this before, but I think it's important to have this conversation in public because there is nobody in private incentivized to push leaders on this. Their donors aren't incentivized to do it. Their staff aren't incentivized to do it. Like, imagine how hard it is to tell grandma it's time to stop driving. Now, what if grandma is a United States senator with, control over a multi-billion-dollar federal budget? Like, it's really, really hard to have that conversation.
Right.
So it's why it's important to push this in public. I do think when folks get into primary the incumbents, it makes the incumbents ask, like, well, what's my campaign message going to be? What's my affirmative case for why I'm the right person to move this forward? Because I'm going to get asked every day, like, well, aren't you too old? Well, I don't think that sounds fun. That doesn't seem like a delightful campaign to me. But it's really hard for them to be able to make the affirmative case. There was a story in the New York Times maybe a week or two ago about John Larson, who's running in Connecticut. He's had health issues over the years. He's been in office for decades. He's having a very competitive primary challenge against him by a couple really qualified young leaders, one of whom has outraised him. And at one point in the article, I think it was by Annie Carney, he talks about how he was, going around town, meeting with folks, and he earnestly asked someone he met, "What's content creation?" It's like, I'm not saying you have to be a content creator. You, as a United States Senate member of Congress, trying to exist in this media environment, should understand what those words mean. Or your staff should have briefed you. But you should understand what those words mean and how people are consuming information. It's like a quintessential example of someone who's so deeply out of touch with where normal run-of-the-mill Americans are.
That story makes me think of when Zuckerberg and a bunch of the social media, CEOs were hauled in, and it was this really embarrassing
2018.
It was really, really embarrassing. And that hasn't gotten any better. And I think that, not to be grandpa can't run the TV or whatever, or doesn't know how to use AOL or something, but
that's, you know what? It is exactly like that. It is, but the stakes are higher.
Yes.
I am never saying that people shouldn't be let me rephrase this. Everyone is entitled to age and retire with dignity and respect and care and love and companionship and all of those things. No one is entitled to do all of those things as one of the top 100 most powerful people in the country.
Right. In a moment in which we have conglomeration of these media companies that are going to control these things, in which we have a burgeoning AI industry that is going to take over a lot of how our economy is run, how our communications work. And if you don't understand these things and you're going to be voting on these bills that are tens, billions of dollars, these things, it's kind of hard to justify not knowing them because you're old.
And the gerontocracy undermines trust in the system. The more older leaders stay in power and the more they fail to meet the moment, whether communications wise or substantively, young people especially see this and are like, well, fuck it, this seems to not matter. If it mattered, certainly someone better than this would be doing it. It further disillusions people about democracy at a moment we desperately need them to engage and participate. It does a real disservice to the party and to the country when these older leaders stay in power for so long. And it's structural. It's not a personal failing. Yeah, there are certainly some older leaders who are quite good, but we got to just get rid of the sacred cows. No individual is so substantively better than any other possible person in their state or district.
Yeah. By the time this conversation comes out, because we're talking before this, but I have a new newsletter as this is out called Things You Forgot from Civics Class, which is all about relearning the foundations of American politics and governance and the civics and those things, because I think it's that same idea that these people have been in the same place for so long. And when we were taught all these things, it just seems like it didn't matter and continued to not matter because the same people were there and nothing really changed and nothing really feels in this moment like it's getting better. I think the conversation we are having in most media circles would feel impolite. And when you were working with candidates, let's start there, tell them how to broach this impolite conversation of calling for generational change.
Well, it's always important to know your role because it's not always the right thing for their candidate or opponent to call for it, whether explicitly or implicitly. Someone like me on the outside, I can do it all I want. So I do think being really mindful of what role it is and what your sort of power dynamic is at play. But for those for whom it is a really prominent talking point of their campaign, it is not just generational change, it's generational change in service of what and who. What will it mean to voters when you win? I think this is something Mamdani did really well. I could very clearly picture what a New York City governed by Zohran Mamdani will be like if he can do everything he promised. Fast and free buses, universal childcare, freeze the rent. Great. I can see that. I can see what my life looks like and how it's different when he's in charge if those things happen. I think that's really powerful. And that's a thing where, especially when you compare that to some of the older leaders he was running against, even putting aside everything wrong with Andrew Cuomo, it was like that he didn't have a vision. He didn't have a vision. He made no explanation of why I should want him to win, only why he wanted to win.
I think one of the best questions in the debate was when they were all asked if was it a Knicks game and a Mets game were at the same time, which one would you choose? And Mamdani was just like Knicks, like he just chose, and like there was a clear vision on that answer in which Cuomo was like, oh, I would leave at half or the seventh inning or what, tried to do both, and it was like, well, it was equivocation when people wanted a clear vision of who you were and what you were, and
just be the basketball fan, dude.
Yeah,
or a baseball fan, whatever.
Right.
Like that's the thing is, nobody is expected to agree with you on 100% of things, but they are expected to know who you are and what you believe. I know what Mamdani believes, and I therefore can decide, seems like on most of the things I can trust him to do the right thing. I don't have to agree with him. That's irrelevant.
You also do a lot of work with media. Like you're talking to me, you're on all over the place. How do you, how would you talk to, or how would you tell someone, a journalist, to broach this impolite conversation? Because I think it's really hard to look at somebody who is a senior member of Congress or the Senate or your state legislature and be like, hey, are you too old to do this job? That's a really hard question to ask. I wouldn't ask it that bluntly, but how would you approach that?
I mean, in some cases, I would ask it that bluntly. I think it's important not to be so careful around these elected officials' feelings because the stakes are so high that we cannot risk that. And I think there's other ways you can make the point around what's your affirmative vision? Why are you the right person to lead in this moment moving forward as opposed to this person? How are you best reflecting the needs of your community where likely the average age is in its late 30s, early 40s? Why are you the best person to tackle things like the housing crisis and childcare crisis? How are you going to communicate in a way that meets the moment for 2025 and 2026? Make them say the things. It's not enough to say I have the experience to do this. It's okay, well, how is that experience going to serve the voters of where you are? And, I've been in spaces now where I'm surrounded by elected officials on whom I've called to retire, and most of them just laugh it off. And I'm like, well, I'm serious. There's a term in baseball of value above replacement, of how much better is this first baseman than any other average first baseman? How many more wins do they deliver? I would be hard pressed to find a member of Congress that has such a high value above replacement that they're worth keeping over someone else in their district at this point. There are very few, a handful, maybe, but most of them, especially in these safe blue seats, it's are you really that much better than anyone else? Different, but better? I don't think so.
It's a really interesting way to look at that, and one that I'm just gonna unabashedly steal from you cold-heartedly. Because I also approach these things like Jay Rosen, who used to run the Columbia Journalism Review, has this thing about covering politics, stakes, not odds. And so not the game of politics, but what's at stake here if this person stays in office, and can they affirmatively tell you that they're going to meet the stakes of the moment? And I just don't think enough of us do that. And I think right now it's a really crucial time to ask that when both parties are very soon going to be in flux. There will be a post-Trump world. I just talked about this recently with a cultural anthropologist about what happens to the MAGA movement after Trump is out of office, because that party will implode without him at the very top. And we're looking at a generational shift in the Democratic Party. And so now it's on us to ask those questions.
And just to follow up on that, I think it's really important to think back to 2013 through 2015 in the Republican Party. Mm-hmm. What they did, especially the Tea Party really started in 2010, then kicked off in earnest in 2014, a horrific midterm cycle for Democrats. This is during Obama's second term. But what they were doing, whether intentionally or not, was preparing to combat a Democratic Party post-Obama. Because the Obama coalition, such that it existed, was Obama's, not the Democratic Party's. It was his party. They prepared and built a party, honestly, around Trump's image, whether they meant to or not, that could win. Our task these next couple of years is to build a Democratic Party that can beat the next iteration of the Republican Party. We need to stop trying to win the last election and prepare to win not just the next one, but the next 10. And part of that is by creating a whole new cohort of leaders who can meet the moment. Can many of the older Democrats do that? I don't think so. Are any of them going to be the right person to like make JD Vance look silly, or Marco Rubio or Kristi Noem or Katie Britt or, I don't know, Erica Kirk or any of these other, the Trump numbnut sons? Like, that's who we have to think about as our opponent. And are we preparing our best possible opposition for that iteration of the Republican Party? Not Trump.
You said a thing earlier, and this is, I think, where I kind of want to end. Is you said that this incoming generation of people who are set up for the thing you just talked about need both the skills and the stomach to do what it takes to do that. Is that because the problems left behind are so big? Radical problems need radical solutions kind of an idea? Or is it something else?
Yes, and I think part of it is that these problems are so big and so structural. Like the status quo and nibbling around the edges. You were talking about moderation earlier. Nibbling around the edges does not solve a generational housing or childcare crisis. Like, it just doesn't. And if you said that to most young people right now, like, even this was, for all of her strengths, like one of Kamala Harris's challenges was that, she was promising like a certain amount of down payment support for first-time homeowners under a certain limit. It's like, that doesn't solve the crisis. I understand why you're making that case, and that's a compelling policy for someone, but that doesn't meet the moment. And if that's your solution to the crisis we're in, then you don't seriously see the crisis as it exists. And I think part of what we are seeing, and we have seen this now with the young leaders who ran and won in 2025, yeah, they want to swing for the fences, but isn't that what we need right now? Shouldn't we at least try to solve things? It feels short-sighted to say, you know what, better things aren't really possible. So I think part of it is that we need leaders who can really imagine a better future and at least paint a picture of what it could look like. And we need folks who can communicate it. We know the media is so fractured. There's no singular source of truth anymore. There's 1,000 sources of truth and even more sources of untruths and falsehoods and straight up lies. So can you as a candidate or as an elected official create enough of a story that brings people in and have enough of a personality to go out into all of the places people get information? Like, there's a lot of chat. Mostly this has died down, thank God. But there's a lot of chatter of like, we need a Joe Rogan of the left. It's like, no, we don't. We need more people on the left who could go on Joe Rogan and who could go on the podcasts and the YouTube shorts and the TikTokers and the creators and also the TV hits and also the 3-hour podcasts. You need people to do it all. You need people to do the 30-second TikTok, the 3-minute cable hit, and the 3-hour podcast. And if you don't have enough of a core sense of self and a vision for the future to be able to do all of those things, you are not right for this moment.
It's this really interesting idea that is sort of like optimism and vision as guts, as having not just the vision and the conviction of those things politically, but having the guts to be someone who can hold your own on a Joe Rogan for that long, and then can also do that in 30 seconds because it's where you are to your core.
I think we talked about this before. It's like, this is why centrists, I think, have a really hard time, because centrism is not an ideology. It's a triangulation. It's a tactic. You cannot constantly be reconfiguring yourself to hold space if you don't actually have a core vision. And it's scary to have a vision because you might fail. You'll probably fail. But I think in this moment, we'd rather have people try and fail than say, screw it.
Amanda, thank you so much for coming on. I would love to have you on next year. We get a little closer to the primaries to see where things are shaping up, where these candidates are, because it's going to be a really exciting next year, I think.
I think we are on the edge of a totally different Democratic Party. And no matter what happens in these primaries, the party we wake up to in December 2026 is going to be something new. And that could be fun.
It will be fun. Let's put it out there now. It will be fun.
Manifestation. It will be fun.
Amanda, thank you.
Thank you.
I want to thank Amanda again for coming on. I really do think that every time she's on here, I learn just a little bit more. You can find a link to Run for Something and to her brand new book, When We Are in Charge, in the links in the bio. And that is it for this episode. Please rate and review the show whenever podcast app you listen to it on. Like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications if you're a watcher on YouTube. Don't forget, you can sign up right now during the Make It Make Sense subscription drive at a discount to become a paid member to get access to weekly reporting, the brand new newsletter, Things You Forgot from Civics class, and a whole host of other great archival stuff from Make It Make Sense. And as always, share the show on social media. It's MIMS News Pod. That's MIMS News Pod, all one word on every platform. I am at Grant Herms on Twitter and Blue Sky, and at Grant_Herms now on everything else. Thank you so much for listening today. I'm Grant Herms, and I'll talk to you next week.